So let's get into the next part of the book of Proverbs. We're just finishing up chapter 2, and we're finally getting to the part in the book of Proverbs where things start to be one verse or two verse, and that's it, and then we discuss it. So just to finish up, we're going to start with verse 20, and it's just going to go to 22. So, that thou mayest walk in the way of good men and keep the paths of the righteous. For the upright shall dwell in the land, and the perfect shall remain in it. But the wicked shall be cut off from the earth, and the transgressors shall be rooted out of it. That is the end of chapter 2. So I wanted to continue what we were talking about in the last video about the book of Proverbs, where I wanted to touch upon how you can tell if somebody is a good person or a bad person. We delved a little bit into an analogy and the example of things that can mess up your path in terms of substance abuse. And I think that was very important, but I did want to finish my thoughts on how to tell if somebody is a bad person or not in terms of like avoiding them. And I think that the end of chapter 2 is a perfect place to discuss that, because it also acknowledges walking in the way of good men and keeping the paths of the righteous. So I thought about it a bit, and I thought about my own personal experiences in my life, as well as my various phases of growth, right? Because I've been through a lot. I've had a lot of different phases. I was quite the surly and cynical teenager. But I was never a bad person. And I know this because I really thought about it. And I thought about it with a lot of humility, which is important when you're analyzing and reflecting on your own actions. I'm comfortable saying that because it's very easy for me to identify when I have done things that are wrong, because I'm very learning oriented. So I don't have a lot of ego when it comes to that. And yeah, again, like I said in the last video, I think really the only times in which I should have been like people would be good to avoid me were when I was having substance abuse problems. Because again, when you're dealing with addiction, when you're dealing with substance abuse, it's very easy to center your life around those substances, and that can make you harmful to other people around you. But a good person or a bad person. And I thought it would be smart to start with good people. So obviously most people are not bad people. That is really important to make very clear. Most people are not perfect. Nobody's perfect. We're all deeply flawed individuals, and everybody makes mistakes in their life. Lots of mistakes. That is why the concept of God's grace, which is essentially giving yourself the grace of forgiveness because you're going to do better next time. That's why that is such an important part of the Bible. We'll get to it when it's time to get to it. But the first thing to recognize, I mentioned this before in terms of the over psychoanalyzing of like everybody saying that everybody is a narcissist. Again, my okay, this is ridiculous point was the whole dark empath thing, where it's like, okay, we're making everything a little bit too clinical. We're overdiagnosing everybody, and it's turning into an extremely black and white view of people are either inherently good or inherently bad. I think it's important to recognize that it takes a lot for somebody to be a very bad person. It takes a lot of choices. And I can say this, I've mentioned this like a couple times before, maybe, but so like on my mom's side, my mom's parents both immigrated here from England. My grandmother's from Sussex, my grandfather was a Cockney. And on my dad's side, we're very Oshawa. We're also from there a couple of generations back, but Oshawa is like a little mini Detroit in Ontario. It is a big GM. It's a big GM city, like factory, and it's also the birthplace of Satan's Choice, which was the second largest motorcycle gang in the world until it was patched over to the Hells Angels in, I believe, 1999. And my last name actually shouldn't be Wright. My last name should be Hill because my dad's biological dad, my aunt's biological dad, his last name was Hill, but he skipped out on my mom and my dad when I think my dad was 3. And then when my dad's mom married her husband, my dad and my aunt were legally adopted. So that is why we have the last name Wright. So my biological grandfather skipped out because he was the right-hand man of the founder of Satan's Choice, and he was a wet worker, which is a hitman. And my dad and my aunt, they've both made a lot of choices to not be anything like where they came from. And they've both done a lot. And my uncle too, my like half brother, my dad's half brother, my uncle, they've all made a tremendous amount of intentional effort from their youth to their adulthood to not be anything like where they came from. And making that choice to be good when a lot of what you know, like when a lot of what you know, like my dad's stepdad, Larry, I think he had his grade 10, like, you know what I mean? Making that choice to be a cycle breaker in that way, it takes a lot of active effort to learn and figure out how to be a good person. It also takes a tremendous amount of effort to be like super duper involved in the second largest motorcycle gang in the world, and to be supplying weaponry, and to be who knows what he did with people as a job. That takes a lot of effort. Most people are not bad people. My family has some bad people in our family. And yeah, you're not a bad person because you acted selfishly once when you were under a lot of stress. You're not a bad person if you made wrong choices. You're not a bad person if you have problems with substances. It takes a lot of effort to go out of your way to be a bad person. So first saying that. Okay, now, good people. I'm going to say, as an example, I have a couple of examples of people actually from my first semester at Dalhousie, my first year at Dalhousie. So I would say a really, really, really good person when I was in first year, this girl that I met, who she's now a woman as well. Her name's Kaylin. And I just always thought that she was just so remarkably cool and good. It wasn't like she was like this, pious bubble. Like she partied, you know what I mean? Like she had boyfriends, everything. She was very normal, but she was just such a ray of sunshine to be around. She always had something good to say about everybody. She was super duper into working out. She just would always make everybody feel included. She always had a smile on her face. It wasn't like she didn't go through anything in her life, but she just had this positive attitude, and it was so magnetic. And here's how I know that I wasn't a bad person back then. And here's how you can tell. No matter how cynical, jaded, surly, blah, blah, blah you may be, or somebody around you may be, I think that the mark of a good person versus a bad person, even if they're cynical, was as polar opposite to Kaylin as I was then. I loved being around her. I loved hanging out with her. I just thought she was so cool. And while I didn't fully understand how she could be so positive, I was very inspired by it. Even no matter how surly, emo, whatever I was inspired by it. And I've always hoped for the best for her. And I think she's doing well. And I hope that she's doing well. But even, that is how you can tell when somebody sees another person who's, I don't know, inspiring to them in some way, or they're very different from them. And even if they might seem like, I don't know if I can trust this person, they're pretty standoffish or whatever. Because I was pretty standoffish at a point. I was very scared of other people. And the standoffish person, they still like that person. They have nothing bad to say about that person. And they respect that person and like hanging out. That's how you can tell that somebody's still a good person. People can make mistakes. People cannot look like the ideal, whatever you would assume the best person in the world looks like. And you might be super so you might be depressed. You might not be where you are in your life. You might feel like, I don't know, you haven't done enough, but that doesn't make you a bad person. That does not make you a bad person. And to finish that about Caitlin, I remember this was like a year ago, I think, and a guy described me as everything that I used to describe, and I still would describe Kaylin by. And I was so, I was so proud of myself. And I felt so grateful to have crossed paths with Kaylin because she really inspired me. And yeah, you know what I mean? So like, and that's been, oh my God, we must have been 17. So that's like 9 years ago. So don't judge a book by its cover. Somebody might seem like they're surly. They might seem like they're a little bit intimidating. They might seem standoffish, but that doesn't make them a bad person.